Good morning.
Good morning.
It's really a pleasure to chat with you. In terms of films right now that are making a statement that need to be heard and that need to be spread, it seems to me like your film is, it comes along at a time that there's so much noise being made finally about issues that are not just an English issue, that are worldwide. When you come here to Toronto to talk about this film, what would you like people to take away?
Well, I'd like people to take away the human side of the story because, these incidents happen all too frequently and they seem to be quite universal. And I'm talking about incidents of unnecessary use of lethal force by the police, often on unarmed black men or persons of colour. And I just think what often gets lost in the media coverage of those incidents is actually humanity behind the story, the loss of life, the human being, and and all that surrounds that. These are people who had lives and had families and were loved, and I think that's what we try to drill down on my story, which is essentially about the people who loved Mark Duggan, and that is the two main participants, characters, if you like, in the hard stop.
Right.
And it really follows them over 2 or 3 years as they deal with the fallout of their best friend's death.
And it is amazing that you spend so much time with them. How much footage did you shoot for this? It must have been a prodigious amount, yeah.
It was well over 120 hours of footage. But fortunately, we had time to process that material.
Right.
And, it's the longest time I've spent editing a documentary. It's my third feature-length documentary.
Right.
But I could say we spent almost a year, really, editing. And in that respect, I'm very grateful to the Sundance documentary film program,
right.
Sundance Institute, for giving us the opportunity to really, really spend time with the material and really make the most out of it. And that had a lot to do with the fact that we were invited to the Sundance Film Lab that they do annually in Utah on Robert Redford's ranch estate.
Right.
And we went out there and spent 7 days working with some of the best documentary film practitioners in the world as far as I was concerned. And we were working with the likes of Joe Beanie, who's edited more than 20 Werner Herzog films.
Right.
I met some of my documentary heroes. Ross McElwee, who made Sherman's March. I think I saw that in the late 80s. And I remember actually seeing that film and, one of those light bulb moments where I just thought, okay, I understand this. This is something that I might want to do in order to express myself.
And, while we're on that track, how did you actually get started that, for this film in particular, what was the kernel that actually got you into the story?
Well, I'm a Londoner, and I saw the London riots unfold on the television screen, and it actually got to a point where I thought, well, I sod this, I don't need to watch on TV. I can jump in my car and half a mile away I can see these events because I'm looking at things that are happening just over the road from where I live. And so, there was that interest, but actually a year later, in 2012, I just happened to be talking to someone at a dinner party, and the dinner party was in North London. It was a family affair. It was my brother-in-law's birthday. And I got talking to someone from North London, Tottenham, who she, I guess, considered herself to be a community leader. And, as you do, the conversation arose. I mentioned that I made documentaries, and I don't know, we just started talking about the London riots because they started in Tottenham. Right. And I said I'd be really fascinated to talk with some people who were involved at the start, in the epicenter of how those riots started. And she just said, well, I happen to know 2 people who'd fit that description. And she put me in touch with Marcus and Curtis.
Wow. And I mean, for them, with you guys following them around for so long, how did they feel about having the cameras so much in their life for so long? Did they just accept that it was part of finally telling a story, or was it difficult for them, or what was that like?
I mean, you'd probably be better off asking them that question.
Right.
But they're very special guys. You know, there's no question about it. And for me, I feel my instincts recognised that from early on, from the first meeting with them. I just knew there was something actually a bit different, and that's enough for me.
Right.
Because what you're looking for is for the unexpected, for something that reveals something that you wouldn't really expect to be there. And
Right.
they're tremendous people, if you like. And from what I understand, Mark Duggan was very much like that. In fact, he was the ultimate of their group of people, because they come from quite an insulated world. They come from a particular housing estate, maybe you call it a project over here,
Right.
which had a history of problems with the police. Going back to 1985,
Right.
there was original disturbances on Broadwater Farm. And so they've got, they're kind of famous for that. They've got a reputation. But when you actually go to that estate, it's actually a very multicultural place. And you've got all kinds of different nationalities of people who are all essentially British, but coming from all different parts of the world. And they're all living side by side in harmony. And in fact, I think that antagonism with the police, and perhaps even the sort of wider society, and certainly the media, has in some ways helped those people who live in that community sort of come together and in fact become sort of, more harmonious.
Wow.
So, as a result, they're very good at dealing with people, and, I think it was really a trust issue, and I think with people like Marcus and Curtis, coming from their background, I got the sense it was just important for me to be who I said I was.
Right.
And when I met them, I said, I'm a filmmaker, I make documentaries. And, to begin with, they had this idea, they wanted to make a fiction film and be actors, in which I'm sure they're capable of, but I explained to them, look, I don't do that.
Right.
And furthermore, I don't think there's a need for us to create a drama.
Right.
Given that there seems to be enough drama in your situation and with your lives. And Marcus, when I met him, had a electronic tag around his ankle for being, quote unquote, or being charged with being, quote unquote, the instigator of the riot in Tottenham, which, as we know, then spread across London and then across the UK. So, I kind of felt instinctively, I just said, look, I think you've got enough drama going on already, and I'd like to make a documentary in the way that I make them, which is observational, and I explained what I do. I urged them to look at some of my previous work, which I don't believe they did at all. But like I said, I'm sure if I deviated from that, if I said I'm a documentary film camera person, and they noticed I didn't seem to know the back from the front end of a camera, and then they might have started to get very twitchy, shall we say, because for all they know, I might have been an undercover policeman.
Right, of course.
And that's not really far-fetched,
right,
considering the
what they went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Marcus is such a. I mean, he carries the film easily. His story, his everything, even the point that he's reached in his life. I think at the point that you were filming him, that it was so fascinating just to see him go through where he was then. I mean, did you realize that it was going to go that way when you started filming him, that maybe he was going to reach these points in his life that things were changing so much for him? No, you just hope, I guess.
You hope, and again, this is why I say, you're following your instincts, and I just, from the get-go, I just had a feeling of, this is a character who's really quite complex, and there's it seems to be enormous profundity, and the phrase "still waters run deep,"
right.
And from a film point of view, I just found it fascinating that actually, if you look at the film, you've got two characters, and when you're sort of casting for characters in documentaries that in documentaries there is also a casting process, but in terms of the actual construction of the narrative, obviously a lot of that happens in the edit.
Right.
Whereas in a drama that would be happening at the script writing stage. But you always want characters who in some way sort of bounce off each other,
right.
for want of a better expression.
Yeah.
And what I love about Marcus and Curtis is you've got one character who's very sort of insulated, very quiet and reflective. And actually, with Marcus, the explosion has already happened before
right.
the story begins. So with Marcus, everything's sort of in retrospect. And, you know, and of course he's the one who takes us back to 1985 and goes on that sort of history really well. With Curtis, the other character Curtis is more the live wire in the film,
right.
if you might have noticed. And whenever you're with Curtis, there's always a sense of things could kind of kick off at
right.
any point. And that's one of the things I love, which you don't know that at the time. You don't, you know, you can't prescribe that, but when it happens, you know, I guess it's your job as a filmmaker to recognise it and try and enhance it and make the most out of it from a storytelling point of view.
I mean, it worked. It seemed to work out very well, and obviously the editing process worked out well. Was there much that you had to cut that you regret? Was there anything that was very hard?
Absolutely, yeah, very much so. You know, we've got an expression. Certainly I learned when I was at the National Film and Television School was kill your babies,
right.
basically.
Yeah.
And you just have to be prepared, as hard as it is, to lose scenes, things that you shot and actually even edited, and just to let them go because they don't work towards sort of telling the wider story. And you know, this film has gone through an awful lot of editing, a lot of material that was in the cut, which then came out, which then got put back in again in slightly different form, which then got taken out again. And, you know, I'd like to think if the film works at this point, and it's because it's really been through the most rigorous editing process that I've ever been involved in, you know. And like I say, it's my third feature-length documentary, and I mean, I've made over 25 one-hour programs for television for the UK, but this has been so intense, but it's really, really genuinely been a labour of love.
One of the things to me is that at this point, do you feel relieved to finally have the project kind of done, or is there still tension with the fact that obviously tonight, you know, you've got the film will debut here at TIFF.
I think you just answered my question.
So yeah, obviously, I mean, it's a big night for you guys.
You know, really, Andrew, you know, you know, when you make films, the film, I certainly believe this, the film's not completed until you have this sort of a response.
Right.
And having the world premiere here at TIFF is really, really special for us. And when I say us, I mean not just myself and Dion, but also Marcus and Curtis, who are here at the festival and will be there tonight.
It's awesome.
At the premiere, and it's awesome. And it's for them, it's an awesome experience. So they've never been to the United States, never been to over the Atlantic.
And I know it's hard for them to be here too, because I understand they had to get all the paperwork to come and everything else.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's unbelievable to think that, I mean, I understand what's going on, but it's unbelievable to think that coming to this, that they've still got to go through these hoops.
But it is, but you know, it was to be expected, and we prepared for that.
Right.
But the thing is to remember is that people from their background, from where they come from Broadwater, Farm Estate, and Tottenham, a lot of the time it's hard for those people, certainly the younger kids, to leave Tottenham, to leave the estate, because you know they become very insulated into a world, and then before you know it, you know, there's another group of kids from another estate half a mile away who say, well, you can't walk around this area because we own this patch. And it, you know, it's really sad. And this is why I think Marcus and Curtis have become role models in that sense of, you know, something youngsters coming from that background can look at and aspire to become, and realise that actually you don't have to be trapped into this sort of prescribed role in society, and you don't have to be a victim, you know, either from another young kid who feels that you shouldn't be, you know, transgressing what they consider to be their territory, or by you know, a police officer who you become a victim of, in the same way that Mark Duggan was.
Right. And I mean, especially when there aren't enough role models. I mean, really, when you look at who they could look up to, it seems like there's such a void. Is that part of the problem? Is that another element of the problem? What would your take be on that?
I think it is part of the problem because, certainly in England, it's all very well for Prime Minister David Cameron to say ABC
Right.
to people in society, whatever it is, get a job, become a valuable member of society, don't join gangs, don't sell drugs, don't be involved in crime, don't run riot on the streets after a young black man who comes from your background is killed unnecessarily by the police, don't go and loot into shops. But from their point of view, they're looking at David Cameron thinking, well, what the hell do you know about my situation and where I'm coming from? Because from what I can see, and a lot of the time they're instinctive, they don't have to necessarily go on Wikipedia and do a research on David Cameron. They can see, they just have to look at him for 5 seconds on television and they realise that those people have got no idea of the reality of their lives, and they feel that, and I think they respond accordingly, and for that reason, I think there is a real deficit of role models, of people they can relate to, who can lead the way and show them that actually there is an alternative, there is a way out, quote unquote.
Well, my last question is really if you had to guess how this would play in the States, where again so many similar issues, do you think that despite the border issues, we'll call them, the different the different accents and everything else, do you think that they will get something from it too?
What can I say? So far, so good.
Right.
I mean, this film really started in terms of support and real interest and love. This film started with Sundance.
Right.
It started with American interest and involvement, and it's clearly a story that resonates across the Atlantic in the States. With incidents happening, obviously with Mike Brown and Ferguson, Eric Garner. And
the list goes on.
Fresh incidents happening, it seems, every month, which we are very much aware of in the UK, and have been covered quite extensively by the UK press, certainly in London and in England. And I know why, because it resonates with something that's happened on our shores very recently. And the Mark Duggan story has not gone away. It's still fresh in people's minds, because what you have to remember is that a man lost his life, and this man was loved. But that then sparked disturbances, which then led to the loss of 5 more lives, and millions of pounds worth of damage to people's property and homes. A widespread death. So the ripple effects are so wide, and at which point society understands and the politicians understand. They might not say this, but they understand that, okay, at this point, it's something that's important to everyone. This story, it's not just for people who come from that estate, or for black people, or for brown people. It's for everyone who is affected by these things. And when it becomes so widespread, then it really, in a way, if anything positive can come out of it, it's that it becomes society's problem. And it's not just a problem of the police and black people. It's all of our problems. And so that's that. I think that's important. I think it's certainly a story that resonates across the Atlantic. We're seeing these incidents happen with increasing regularity in America. I understand that there's a problem also, even in Toronto, with certain carding practices by the police, which I believe, and certainly the festival director, Cameron Bailey, believes is a reason why our film, The Hard Stop, will resonate with a Toronto audience, and perhaps a wider Canadian audience. So it is something that I think is important, and I'll just obviously we've got guys talking from with a very specific London accent,
Right.
and even in London, it's a North London Tottenham accent. They're talking in slang,
Right.
but I think people, we haven't had people saying, "Can you use subtitles?" It did come up at the Sundance
That
Lab,
seems
but that was
ridiculous,
over
though.
a year ago, and now
Right.
it's just no one ever mentions it,
No.
and I think people understand. I mean, and after a while, actually, you start to tune into how they speak and the rhythm of how they speak, and
Yeah.
I think it's great. The film starts with a quote, and it's from Martin Luther King. "A riot is the language of the unheard."
Right.
And for me, that as a filmmaker, it became sort of a kind of guiding light in the film, because I had to get around my own prejudices to begin with when I started filming, with how Marcus and Curtis talk.
Right.
Because I've grown up in a society where I've probably taken on some of those prejudices myself. You hear people who talk like Marcus and Curtis, and you live in London as I do, you know that people who talk like that come from a particular place in part of London.
Right.
And you recognise that immediately. But you also have this kind of almost instinctive knee-jerk reaction, which is that, but they've got nothing to say that's really worth paying much attention to. Unless it's Sacha Baron Cohen making a joke and doing a comedy sketch, it kind of gets dismissed out of hand.
Right.
And that's why I think it was really important, I think, for me to really focus on that quote by Martin Luther King, and to give them their own voice and give them their own platform to speak, and not to interject or put a voiceover onto the film, which was considered. I considered using my voiceover as a sort of intermediary to tell the story, but in the end, I'd like to believe that it wasn't necessary, and I think if hopefully a lot of people will go and see the film and really understand that voice and hear their voice and get something from it. I just want to say it's a pleasure being here at Toronto and being at the Toronto Film Festival.
Well, we're glad to have you.
So it's such an honour to be here to do the world premiere. And what I'm really, really encouraged by, just by going to other films at the festival, is the audience.
Right.
The level of engagement by the audience with the films that they're there to see. I don't think I've been to a fair few festivals. I just don't think I've seen that before. I went to a film yesterday morning at 9 a.m, which I read about, which I think is one of the more, let's say, left field programming decisions, perhaps. And so, one of the more braver programming decisions, perhaps, by the TIFF selection committee. And it was at 9 in the morning. I was convinced I'd arrive and I'd be one of about 4 or 5 people in the audience. And I was completely wrong.
Right.
It was full.
People show up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope you have a fantastic premiere. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Toronto. And thank you very much.
Not at all. It's been a
Pleasure chatting.
Thank you.